Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something fascinating, how a very targeted conflict in the Persian Gulf is, believe it or not, setting off this chain reaction, a cascade of completely unintended consequences that are literally redrawing the global map.
Okay, so to get this, the first thing you have to understand is that the real target here isn't some battle line in the sand. No, it's this massive, incredibly complex system you see here, the energy corridor. It's the whole shebang, the fields, the pipelines, the tanker routes. Think of it like the main artery carrying the lifeblood of the modern economy out of the Gulf and to the rest of the world.
And this quote right here, it just nails the central idea. This whole conflict is less about capturing territory and more about, well, blowing up the energy bridge that connects the huge producers in the Gulf with their biggest customers. And as you can imagine, when a bridge like that gets hit, the shock waves travel, and they travel far. So that shock wave, it travels along the tanker routes, and you know where it lands the hardest? Right where the corridor ends, Asia. And this is where we start to see the first huge, totally unintended consequence take shape.
Just look at this data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration. It tells the whole story, really. The vast, overwhelming majority of oil and natural gas flowing through the Strait of Hormuz, it's not heading for the West. It's for the incredibly energy-hungry economies of Japan, South Korea, India, and China. They're the ones on the front line of this economic shock.
So the conflict kicks off, and it quickly spirals into what the source material calls a vicious circle of strikes and counterstrikes. Qatar, who's a huge player in this, becomes the perfect symbol of this breaking bridge. And why? Because it sits on this massive natural gas field that it literally shares with Iran. You've got one giant gas field under the seabed, just split by a line on a map.
And this is where the geopolitics get, well, they get pretty wild. The U.S. starts playing this kind of good cop, bad cop game. According to the Associated Press, its ally Israel hits the Iranian side of that shared field. So when Iran inevitably retaliates against Gulf infrastructure, Washington steps in and presents itself as Qatar's protector against a reaction that its own ally helped provoke in the first place.
Now, this isn't just some abstract strategic game. The impact hits home, literally, in people's kitchens. In India, for example, the disruptions to liquefied petroleum gas supplies, the gas people use for cooking, it forced families and businesses to scramble for alternatives, and they turned to electric options like induction stoves, not for the climate, but out of simple, urgent necessity.
And that brings us to the crucial point here. The war basically proved for all to see that the Gulf Energy Bridge could be turned into a battlefield at a moment's notice. So for all those Asian nations that depend on it, suddenly, electrification, it stops being some far-off optional climate policy. It starts to look a whole lot more like a vital insurance policy against total chaos.
And to see the sheer scale of the shift this insecurity is speeding up, look at this number. The International Energy Agency projects that just electric vehicles, EVs alone, are going to displace over 5 million barrels of oil demand every single day by 2030. That is a colossal, game-changing shift.
And here it is. Here is the massive, severe irony in all of this. By attacking the old fossil fuel corridor, the United States and Israel are inadvertently making the strategic case, a powerful case, for a global switch to electrified systems. And who is the undisputed king of those systems right now? Their main strategic rival, China, which already has the manufacturing scale, the supply chains, and the global market reach.
Okay, so let's shift gears and head over to Europe, because the shockwaves from the Gulf create a completely different, but just as profound side effect over there. The continent, for all intents and purposes, splits right in two.
The way we can think about it is Citadel Europe versus Shore Europe. So the Citadel powers, think Germany, France, the UK, they initially see this conflict as a strategic problem, a file to be managed. But the shore powers, countries like Spain, Turkey, and Italy, they feel the war immediately through its physical consequences, messed up shipping routes, insane energy prices, and the very real threat of spillover.
And yeah, this was not some distant event for very long. The economic shock landed hard in the form of skyrocketing energy bills. Europe's main gas price shot up by about 65%, putting just immense pressure on countries that rely on gas, like Italy, Hungary, and Romania, and sending electricity prices clean through the roof.
And all that economic pain, it forced a really stunning reversal. The very same Citadel powers that started out as hawks, pretty much aligned with the US and Israel, suddenly started putting diplomatic counterpressure on their own allies to cool things down. Their whole strategic playbook was being rewritten by their economic reality. You can actually hear this U-turn in their own words. I mean, just listen to Germany's defense minister, Boris Pistorius, with this incredibly blunt statement, basically washing Germany's hands of the conflict's logic and its origins.
And from France, retired General Michel Yakovlev gives us this. I mean, what an unforgettable image. The invitation for Europe to jump in and join the fight felt like getting a discounted ticket for the Titanic after it had already hit the iceberg. The disaster was already underway.
And then you have Britain's leader Keir Starmer, who just makes the link completely explicit. He says de-escalation wasn't just some abstract foreign policy goal, it was the fastest way to bring economic relief to families at home who were getting crushed by the cost of living.
Now, the shore countries, they didn't have to do a U-turn. For them, the economic shock just poured gasoline on their initial fears about the legality of it all, about provocation, and about spillover. It made their calls to contain the fire even louder and more forceful.
And their actions were very direct, very material. You have Spain banning the use of its military bases for the conflict. You have Turkey pushing hard for mediation while publicly condemning the attacks. And then poor Italy, getting hammered by gas prices, had to roll out emergency economic measures at home, cutting fuel taxes just to protect its people and businesses.
So when you step back, the big picture is this. A conflict that was started, presumably, to reinforce an old security order ended up forcing countries all over the world to start building brand new systems. Everything from Asian EV supply chains to new European diplomatic alliances. The architects of the war ended up being the unintended architects of a world they never planned for.
Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? It's a question that really messes with the very definition of winning and losing this conflict, and it forces you to think about how actions you take to control the present can accidentally end up building a future you never saw coming.